Welcome to today's video, where we'll explore the harrowing events of the Memphis Riot of 1866, a brutal and violent attack on African Americans that marked a dark chapter in the struggle for racial equality in the United States. We'll discuss the stories of those involved and the lasting consequences of the riot. Please note that the contents of this video may be distressing for some viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. In May 1866, just a year after the Civil War had ended, racial tensions were at a boiling point in Memphis, Tennessee. The city's growing African American population, many of whom were formerly enslaved, were striving to build new lives and assert their rights as freed people. However, this progress was met with hostility from white residents, culminating in a devastating race riot that exposed deep-seated racial hatred. The violence began on May 1, 1866, and lasted for 3 days. White mobs, including police officers and firefighters, targeted the city's African American community, unleashing a wave of destruction and terror. At least 46 black residents were killed. Numerous black women were sexually assaulted, and countless homes, schools, and churches were burned to the ground. One of the victims was a black man named William Ruffin, who was assaulted by a group of white men, including a police officer, before being fatally shot. His wife, Lucy Tibbs, was also beaten during the attack. And the violence didn't discriminate based on age or gender. Carolyn Davis, an elderly black woman, had her home broken into and was brutally attacked by white rioters. She survived, but her house was destroyed. The Memphis Riot exposed the systemic racism and inequality that persisted even after the abolition of slavery. The violent event sent shockwaves through the nation, prompting congressional hearings led by the Joint Committee on Reconstruction. In these hearings, numerous witnesses, including Lucy Tibbs and Carolyn Davis, testified about the brutality they had experienced. The testimonies from the survivors of the Memphis Riot played a significant role in shaping Reconstruction policy. As a result, Congress passed the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, which mandated military occupation in the southern states in order to protect the rights of African Americans and to enforce the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed equal protection under the law. The Reconstruction Acts of 1867, also known as the Military Reconstruction Acts, were a series of 4 laws passed by the United States Congress in 1867 and 1868. These acts were designed to rebuild the southern states and reintegrate them into the Union following the Civil War, while also protecting the rights of newly freed African Americans. The Reconstruction Acts faced significant opposition from President Andrew Johnson, who vetoed the legislation multiple times. However, Congress did manage to override his vetoes, and the acts were eventually passed into law. The Reconstruction Acts were essential in implementing the goals of the radical Republicans, who sought to enforce equal rights for African Americans and to punish the southern states for their role in the Civil War. The main provisions of the Reconstruction Acts included 1. Dividing the southern states, except Tennessee, which had already been readmitted, into 5 military districts, each governed by a Union general. The military authorities were responsible for maintaining order and protecting the civil rights of all citizens, including the newly freed African Americans. 2. Requiring the southern states to draft new state constitutions that guaranteed African American men the right to vote. These new constitutions had to be approved by a majority of registered voters, including African Americans, before the states could be readmitted to the Union. 3. Mandating that the southern states ratify the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including former enslaved people, and guaranteed equal protection under the law. The ratification of the 14th Amendment was a prerequisite for readmission to the Union. And 4. Disqualifying former Confederate leaders from holding public office or voting in elections, thus weakening the political power of the former Confederacy. While the Reconstruction Acts were intended to create a more just and equal society in the South, Their impact was limited by the rise of white supremacist organizations like the KKK and the implementation of Jim Crow laws that perpetuated racial segregation and discrimination. The end of Reconstruction in 1877, marked by the withdrawal of federal troops from the South, allowed these regressive policies to take hold and further disenfranchise African Americans for nearly a century. And as alluded to earlier, President Andrew Johnson's stance on equality for former slaves in America was notably unsympathetic, and he consistently opposed policies that aimed to uplift and protect the rights of African Americans. As a Southern Democrat who rose to power following the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, Johnson held more lenient views toward the defeated Confederacy and prioritized restoring the Union over ensuring equal rights for former slaves. Johnson's approach to Reconstruction was characterized by his opposition to the radical Republicans in Congress who sought to enforce civil rights and equal protection for African Americans. Johnson vetoed numerous bills aimed at protecting the rights of former slaves, including the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the Reconstruction Acts. And Johnson's opposition hindered the progress of civil rights for African Americans during this critical period in American history. Additionally, Johnson's presidential Reconstruction policies allowed Southern states to enact Black Codes, which were a set of laws designed to restrict the freedom and civil rights of African Americans and to force them into labor arrangements that closely resembled slavery. One such policy was the 40 acres and a mule promise, which originated from Union General William T. Sherman's Special Field Orders No. 15. This order allocated confiscated Confederate land along the southeastern coast of the United States to be divided into 40-acre plots and distributed to former slaves. The intention behind the policy was to provide economic stability and a means of self-sufficiency for African Americans after the abolition of slavery. However, President Johnson rescinded this order shortly after taking office, returning the land to its former Confederate owners. This decision effectively dashed the hopes of former slaves for economic independence and contributed to the perpetuation of poverty and inequality within the African American community. And all in all, Johnson's policies laid the groundwork for those Jim Crow laws, which perpetuated racial segregation and discrimination for nearly a century. So as we remember and learn from the tragic events of the Memphis Riot of 1866, it is important to acknowledge and address the systemic racism that continues to exist in our society today, over 150 years later. So share your thoughts on this dark chapter in American history in the comments below, and join us in our commitment to fighting for racial equality and justice for all. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Together, let's continue learning from our past and to work towards a more inclusive and equitable future for us all. We'll see you in the next video.